Ciao.
C'est pour le costume.
Super, c'est pour un film en costume?
Avez-vous une expérience professionnelle?
Oh, right. Bradbury. Okay. We're there now. We're almost there. We're here first, though. Richard Gunther is here with us this week, everybody. Richard Gunther on Twitter, at Richard Gunther. He does some fun stuff. How do people find your other Twitter accounts? Because I think they're hilarious. And are you still doing that as much as you did, or have you kind of backed off of it?
It's hard to maintain a whole bunch of different voices, and I have misposted to a couple, which ends up confusing people. And so I've ramped that back a little bit. But the best way to follow any other Twitter account that I use is to follow Richard Gunther on Twitter, because I retweet all the other accounts.
Right. It was a fun thing. Honestly, it was a fun thing that was born of a time when Twitter wasn't a cesspool.
Right.
When Twitter was still an interesting way to do interesting things. Like, I still marvel, and it's got to be over 10 years ago now, well, close to, the time that they tweeted Romeo and Juliet in real time. Do you remember this?
Vaguely.
They made accounts for Romeo and Juliet and Mercutio and Tybalt and Ophelia and everybody, because there are so many things you don't think about, like the fact that they were 13, 15-year-old kids, first of all, that all of Romeo and Juliet took place over the course of a couple of days, I want to say. I don't even know who mounted this campaign, but they did. Like, you could follow all of the characters. And if you were following all the characters, because obviously Polonius isn't going to be like, oh, I'm dead now. But, who is the king? Who is the king? I can't remember the king's name now.
I do not know.
Yeah, but the king would have talked about the fact that, Hamlet, what? Oh, that's Hamlet. I'm doing Hamlet, not Romeo and Juliet. Now I've gotten all my Shakespeare stuff confused. Anyway, it was a fun time. And the gnomes de tweet that Richard had and still has were an interesting sort of... it's back when Twitter was an interesting communication tool as opposed to a megaphone. Right. I want to talk, and forgive me because this doesn't leave you a lot of room. Although if you want to ask questions, because there might be something that I miss, I want to talk about my trip to the Tower Theater store in LA. Yeah,
please do.
All right. So Apple 3 weeks ago tomorrow, I think, as people hear this, and time is wibbly wobbly, but we do what we can. Opened up a theater in LA. A store in LA. I'm about 40 miles from downtown LA at this point. And so I thought, I'm going to go down there. And Allison Sheridan and I talked about, we're going to go down there. And then I was like, I'm not sure I'm actually going to go down there because it's like 40 miles. And I'm probably going to be up until 3 a.m. producing a couple of shows before that. And she was like, all right, well, I'm going to go with my friend. I'm like, okay, fine. And then she wrote to me and she was like, I don't think I'm going to go with my friend. I'm not going. And I was like, oh, because I had actually sort of started to lean back to, I'm going. And she's like, well, okay. And then she was like, hey, Steve and I talked about it. We're going to go. I'm like, great. We're all going to meet up. We're all going to go. And then she messaged me on like the day before. And she was like, yeah, we got an inspection at the house and we can't go. So leaving you on a lurch again. So fine, I'm going by myself. Get up at 6 a.m, which for me, I stay up for 6 a.m, much more than I get up for 6 a.m. But get up at 6 a.m, take a train downtown, whatever, walk around, and I'm headed towards where the thing is telling me the Tower Theater is. How much do you know about that area where they put it?
Very little.
Okay.
I have walked around downtown several times, and I always need my phone to find my way around.
Yeah. So this street is lined with theaters. It's lined with theaters, most of which have been turned into other things. Many of which are just closed, but they can still be open for stuff. I know that one of them is actually being renovated right now, and it's within a block, I want to say, of the Tower Theater. It's this weird thing because you think of, we hear things like LA is the, second biggest city in the country, and it's so incredibly expensive. And you don't think about the fact that there are parts of LA. Skid Row is not just a band name. Right. I leaving the train station to walk to the theater or the store, which is about a mile walk, maybe a little bit more. past a couple of places where you couldn't really walk on the sidewalk easily because there are tents with homeless people in them. Not set up by the city, but not being kicked out by the city either. Although I think last week actually there was a big thing to get a bunch of the tents. And it's interesting because you say, well, get a bunch of tents off the sidewalk. Well, that's getting a bunch of people, displaced again. And you would argue they were pretty displaced as it was. So walking down the street, I mean, they're like, buy cheap jewelry and, here's prepaid cellular and get a calling card so you can call your family in, whichever country, they live in. It's not the most affluent part of the city, I would say. And then you come to all of these weird, like beautiful, wonderful things at the same time. Like these theaters were built, I believe, as movie theaters. Back when they built movie theaters, like movies were a thing to go to, right? Not a thing that like, here's 15 screens, 7 of which are showing the latest Fast and Furious movie. Going to the movie was like going to the theater.
It was an event, right?
Yeah, right. I keep talking about the Bradbury Building. For people who have seen Blade Runner, you may remember that J.F. Sebastian lived in the Bradbury Building, which was like sort of open in the middle, and it was raining in because the place was, dilapidated and terrible. And there was a elevator that you would probably not want to get on because who's actually doing upkeep for that? although maybe J.F. Sebastian, because he was pretty good with mechanical stuff.
True.
That's a real building. It's not based. It turns out, because I always assumed, being a science fiction head, that it was named after Ray Bradbury as just sort of a tip of the hat. It is actually the Bradbury Building, named after a mining magnate, I believe. I took a picture of the stuff. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I was just amazed to find that it's there. And in fact, in better times, you can go in. Unfortunately, it's closed to the public right now because I don't know if it's staffing now that we seem to want to say that the pandemic is behind us, or if it's still concerns about public safety. Maybe if I'd gone a week later, you could actually go in, but that's there. And then you keep passing these like theaters that have the grades down, but just these absolutely beautiful like entryways, which is all you can see. And then going to the Apple Store was absolutely amazing. People have probably heard this. It is the first movie theater in either LA or California that was built specifically for talkies. So there were plenty of movie theaters, but they all showed silent films. It's quite possible they doubled as, stages for other stuff as well. Not unlike the place that the Harvard Square movie theater, which closed in 2012 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, had a storied history. It was like a giant movie house, and it showed tons of films, but also Frank Sinatra appeared there back in the day. The Clash actually appeared there. They had to cancel the second show because there was a riot when people couldn't get into the first one and blah, blah, blah. I assumed that it was for more than just movies, but it was designed to be a place that would show talkies. And Apple has done just a phenomenal job renovating it. Absolutely gorgeous. So I'm there. I'm taking pictures. I'm happy to be there. Met up with a couple of friends. It was weird because the California governor had just said, right, no more masks. It's all fine now. And so it was a store full of people with no masks.
Really? Wow.
Almost entirely. There were some people who still had masks on, but we're all vaccinated. I assume we were all vaccinated anyway. There were, like I say, some of the staff still had masks. Some of the staff did not. Most of the people who were just in there did not. I was, fresh off, I think, 3rd week, fully vaccinated. And the state had opened the thing, and I was like, I wore a mask on the train. I wore a mask some places where I was in LA, but everybody had their mask off, and it felt decent too. So met up with a couple of friends there, shook hands with somebody outside of my house for the first time in over a year, hugged somebody outside of my house for the first time in over a year, which was amazing.
Yes.
And so otherwise I'm just taking pictures, feeling the good feeling. And the one of the Apple guys was like, "Oh, that's a great shot," which I'm pretty sure he had to say to everybody. If I've been taking a picture of my shoe, he'd probably be like, "Oh, I like what you're doing with your picture of your shoe there." But he tells me that my panoramic shot from the balcony is a great shot. He's like, oh, if you're looking for a good photo op, there's Tim Cook. And I was both grateful, and at the same time, I was like, well, now this is what my whole trip is about. Like, if I don't get a picture with Tim Cook, this whole thing will be a wash.
Now, had you known that he was going to the store?
No. I suspected he was going to the store. So I have a friend who, I knew Deirdre O'Brien was going to be there, and somehow I did not see her. But I have a friend who works at another Apple store in the Los Angeles area. And he was like, hey, guess who I saw last night? I was like, oh, cool. So I knew that she was around. I knew she would probably be here. And, you know, he's got a private jet. It's a short flight. I figured he would probably be there, but that's not why I went, nor did I, you know, and if he hadn't been there, I wouldn't have been disappointed. Told a friend of mine, though, that it was a bit like going to Disneyland, because not only was Tim Cook there, Deirdre O'Brien was there, didn't see her. Maybe she was on her break. Maybe I just wasn't at her station. I don't know. Jay Blahnik, the Nike guy who, you know, does a lot of the fitness stuff for Apple Watch, was there. I feel fairly certain that some of the trainers for Apple Fitness Plus were there, though I will be honest, I have not done nearly enough with the Apple Fitness Plus to be able to say for certain. But then there were also a few celebrities there, like people who either have done or are doing shows for Apple TV Plus, like Nick Kroll was there. Mark Duplass was there. I don't know if you know him. He's been on, he's an independent filmmaker with his brother. He and his brother, whose name escapes me right now, they make films. Okay. He also did a long run on the Mindy project.
Oh, okay.
And then, and he's also on the morning show. He plays a producer, Chip. Yeah. Okay. So that guy was there. And he was talking to a guy that I recognize, whose name I still can't remember. I've just like, it's this whole little block now, but I looked at him, I was like, God, I know you, and I know I should know you. And he's like, well, what you do is you take your picture with me and then look me up, and then you'll be really impressed. So I took my picture with him, and I still can't freaking remember who he is.
Well, you need to do a Google search on that picture.
Well, I know somebody's told me. It's like it's seriously like I have just put in a mental block right now. So in my head, because I know he's a comedy guy, and hopefully he would be okay with this, I will say he is a, quote, handsome, end quote, Clint Howard.
Okay.
Because, you know, that's kind of a tough stretch. Anyway, so I got my picture taken with Tim Cook, and that was cool. And then I left.
That is very cool. Now, you...
Go on.
I think you said in an earlier show that you spoke with him?
Briefly. There were people there who actually did spend time with him, and spent between half a minute and a minute, because it was a bit like, I mean, he was a rock star there. And
right,
and when I said the whole thing about now this is all about that, I mean, seriously, I was like next person to get my picture with him, except then he took a left and started going down this different aisle. And then all of a sudden I'm like 6 people deep, because it wasn't like just standing there lining up to take a picture. Ostensibly, he's trying to walk from one part of the store to the other. Now, He was there to glad hand. He was there to talk to people. He was there to have his selfie taken and all that stuff. There were some people who talked to him for a considerable amount of time. Mark Duplass and his friend, whose name, as I say, escapes me, actually stood and talked with him for 5 minutes because, you know, they're celebrities and that's what they do. And that's the whole reason they were there. I mean, it was a Hollywood event in a way.
Well, yeah, and so that's the thing that catches my attention, right? Because all the stuff you're describing seems very Hollywood. Yeah. And I don't remember if you have before, but I think, you know, I've been to store openings before. We had spoken, I was at the Miami store opening when they moved that store to a new location. There's an energy and an excitement there, even without all these celebrities around.
Yeah. Well, I know I have not been to another store opening before. It just never quite worked out. I would be curious to know. I would imagine when they opened the Nashville store, there were a bunch of musicians there, would be my guess, but I wasn't there for it. I don't know. I mean, of course, they've got Apple TV Plus production happening here. I was not eavesdropping. I did, though, because they were standing in the middle of a bunch of people, hear Mark Duplass says something about, I think it was actually Tim Cook who said, so you guys are, you know, back to shooting or back in production or something like that. To which Duplass said, finally. I mean, so that's, I mean, it's an industry thing, you know? I mean, if they were in Seattle, I don't know who would be there. If they were in Dallas, Texas, I don't know who would be there. They're in Hollywood. They're going to be movie stars. And the people that they truck in from, you know, Cupertino to be part of it as well. It's weird because I know that I've watched too many of the Apple keynotes at this point, because there was a woman that I was like, I've seen her a million times and I have no idea who that is. And somebody actually told me, somebody who works there, I know she works for retail. I just, you know, sort of lost that. But yeah, it was a tremendous amount of fun. And yes, I spoke to Tim Cook and I said the only thing we did not have a conversation. I just told him, I think what I said was, what you are doing is incredible, because it is. I remember the day that Steve Jobs died, somebody asked Rob Enderle, who's the wrong person to ask, but somebody asked Rob Enderle, is this it for Apple? And he said yes. And there were a number of people for a number of years. It was like, yeah, this is it for Apple. Apple's best days are behind it.
Yep.
And, you know, there's no, we do not by any means celebrate the fact that Steve Jobs is gone, but I can't imagine what company Apple would be today if Steve Jobs was still the CEO. Might be better in a completely different way, might be just as big in a completely different way, but what the guy's done is incredible. And, you know, it was only an hour later that I was like, oh, I should have talked to him about how much he's screwing up podcasts.